You can help support the channel by heading to our merchandise store and picking up some of our great aircraft designs created by our graphic designer. We have everything from fighters to transport aircraft, which you can choose to have printed on t-shirts, mugs, stickers and much more. Head to the description below and click the links and pick up your design today. Thank you and enjoy. Let's get on to your time in the Air National Guard and let's talk about DACT, because you said like when you get to the Guard you kind of do a bit more of that. What was it like flying against you know, the types of the time? I'm guessing you went against F-18s, F-15s, the likes. Tell us about that, Tony.
Well, let's back up. So DACT, so the first time when I was at Hill, the first time I got to fly dissimilar that I can recall was we would take a squadron, there was 3 squadrons, and we'd rotate them and do a fair weather deployment because the weather was always bad in the winter there. So we took the first deployment that I remember, we went to George Air Force Base, and they had F-4s there. So we're going to go up and do a dissimilar sortie against the F-4s. So we take off in a little 2-ship, and I'm with my flight lead, and I'm fairly young, and we start the fight, and I remember being on the wing, and I look down and I just visually pick up these F-4s. They're kind of smoking and you could see them way down below. There they are. And I go, oh, that's the bad guys. So we roll in on them. And as we're rolling in on them, they eventually either via radar or visually pick us up. And I see them start turning. And I go, huh? What are they doing? They must not see us. Because it was this huge arcing turn. But that's all the, you know, that's the best rate turn they could give you. And so you could see right there the difference in performance. It was clear, crystal clear, like, oh my God, this thing, they can't turn at all. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but at the time they were the best there was. But the F-16, the turn radius, 3,000 feet, was way smaller. So that was the first time I did any dissimilar. Now take it from there. I'm out. I go to the Kansas Air National Guard. We were all full-time instructors there, and we did a lot of dissimilar. We did a lot of air-to-air. There was a former F-4 squadron there that was a weapons school for the Air National Guard, and they were all very good pilots, and they flew the F-4 very well. But we would take our students, or when we had flying time left over and we had to fly at the time, we would do continuation training, just our own IPs, and we'd go fly against, say, the F-15s or somebody. How did the F-16 compare? And I know you've talked to the Hornet guys, and you know, but for an example, I don't know at the time then if it was so much the aircraft or the operator, because I can tell you, and this one sticks out in my mind, St. Louis was pretty close to Wichita, Kansas, and those guys, they were F-15 guys at that Air National Guard unit, and they were pretty proud of themselves. They would primarily hire weapons patch active duty guys coming out of active duty that were weapons officers, or you had to be pretty good aviators. So we did some continuation training. I remember going up with this other guy, and he briefed it. And I got to tell you, I don't mean this in a bad way, but it shows you the difference. It's not necessarily the aircraft; it's the operator. But we would start the fight, and we'd do our intercepts coming at each other. And at a certain range, we were flying in res cell, which means we were like fingertip. And we do whatever we had to do to win. It wasn't, you know, this like we go to war type of thing, but we would do a tactic that we knew we could probably have the best chance. Remember the F-15 at the time, they had the AIM-7, and so you had to figure out how to get around their radar so they'd lose you so you could get behind them. Otherwise, they're going to shoot you in the face with their AIM-7s. Mm-hmm. And so we stay in res cell, and they're going to see us on their radar as one target. They don't know. They think, well, it's just one contact. And at a certain range, we would split. And so I would I'd make a hard right turn, descending straight down, and the flight lead would start a left-hand turn, climbing turn upwards, and they would glom on to him, and they'd lose me in the beam. It's a Doppler radar. If you get in the beam, they're going to lose you. And so I'd take a huge vertical down. He's dragging them away. They're glommed onto him, and they're chasing him as a two-ship. And a lot of times I'd pull back up, and you wouldn't want to put your radar on them because you're going to spike their raw warning gear, and then they're going to know, oh, he's over there somewhere. And a lot of times you can look up and just visually find him. So after the 4th time in a row, I came around and got unobserved shots basically on him. I asked the flight lead, we're almost out of gas. I said, hey, you want to be the shooter? And he started laughing. He said, no, you're doing just fine. Anyway, the point being is, you know, whoever's there, they were probably new operators or, you know, hadn't flown in a while or whatever, but radar discipline was really big in the air-to-air role. You know, you got to have one guy searching this part of the sky and the other guy's got to be searching this part of the sky, because if you lose, you know, the target in the beam, then you're going to lose him. And so you still have to, you know, search that piece of the sky to make sure you pick him up when he starts coming at you. Now contrast that with the Hornets. Those guys, their radar was, I don't know, as King Kong. You probably are aware that the RAW, what is that, radar homing and warning device, a little scope. Not only would you get a depiction on the scope of the threat, whether it's air-to-air or surface-to-air missile, you'd also get audio in your headset, different types of beeps and squeaks. Well, the Hornet, you know, a lot of times when you're fighting, you're busy looking at the radar, at your radar, where the contacts, you're talking, you're flying, and the raw scope was just kind of over there, but you wouldn't get any audio a lot of times from the F-18. So it wouldn't bring your attention over there to see is he looking at me? Does he really have his radar on me? And so again, to fight him, you're trying to go around them and get outside their radar coverage. Mm-hmm. And so you'd do all that, and you'd see them on your radar. Well, it looks like they're leaning over this way. They're north of me or whatever direction. I think I got around them. And then all of a sudden you hear on the radio, Fox 1, Viper in the southern part of you're dead. And you go, oh, crap. And, you know, how did he do that? So that was kind of the way that operated. I always thought the F-18, even today, 2-engine, there's really not a lot of alpha limit on a thing. I thought that was one of the most spectacular fighters in the inventory of our services, really. As far as close fighting with them, if you wrap it up, and I've looked at some of your other interviews when you interviewed the F-18 guys, you could fight with them, but you had to be in the right environment, and you had to know kind of where you were at. You didn't want to get slow with them, because even if you got slow with them and you were above them, they could jack that nose up at you and point at you and always threaten you, to where you had to maneuver, and now you had to come back down. So they were very, very good. They were very challenging fighters to fight against. The F-15, the difference there, well, they had two big motors, and so if you didn't want to get slow with them. If you were down at 15,000 feet, you could outrate an F-15 all day and turn circle and defeat them. But for example, I mean, I don't know if many people did it. One time we were down at Holloman, and we just did a BFM set with an F-15 guy, and I went out and did some BFM, and I said, you know what? I don't know, and he didn't really know either. Let's just start at line abreast, 3,000 feet, 300 knots, and plug our airplanes in the afterburner and see what happens. And very few people know. What do you think's going to happen? Who's gonna?
I reckon F-16.
Huh?
I reckon F-16 would push ahead.
Well, as a matter of fact, that's exactly what happened. We go into afterburner, and I start out accelerating and go ahead of him, and I got maybe half a mile in front of him, and I'm looking back, and after 5-10 seconds, all I see is these big square intakes coming, and that guy going boom right behind me, because the power, you got two big
Of course.
Engine's there, and eventually it builds up the momentum and went right by me. But the F-16 would out-accelerate it initially. And I don't think a lot of guys even thought about it. But anyway,